And Tara and Gabe are going to be presenting.
All right, well, thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. We are here today to provide an update on where our work is at related to information, resource, and referral. And specifically, we are going to begin the presentation reviewing the latest research on how parents of young children access and utilize information, resource, and referral, which I'm going to refer to as IR&R throughout the presentation. And then we are going to provide an update on our current contract with 211 LA County, highlighting the latest data on who and how they are serving parents of young children. Then we will also review the latest county activity and their recent procurement of IR&R services. And then finally, we're going to end with next steps to guide our future work related to IR&R. So beginning with, I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Gabriel, in our communications department to dig into the data and research we have now on how parents are accessing information and resources.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this wonderful topic. As we were, like Tara and I were just talking about this, the question we were asking with our research is we wanted to learn, well, how do we reach parents, number one, but then number two, how do parents reach us? Which was a critical question and a way to look at it because we're looking at what platforms and channels and how do they get information. And I brought some props because I thought about this like back in the day, 20 years ago, maybe 18. This was how I would reach out to people, right? Maybe. And if I needed to reach somebody, maybe I dial 411. I don't know because the carrier charges were kind of a lot. Anyhow. But now, today, like, and I say this with the caveat that technically we are not the audience we're trying to reach, but in many cases we have very similar behaviors in that if I wanted to find out if a store was open, I wouldn't call 411, I would Google it, right? And I would look at the hours it might be there. I wouldn't talk to anybody. I wouldn't want to be honest, because you get the voicemail prompt and the pain, right? So I say this as, you know, more broadly, kind of the parenting research and the largest generation that exists right now in the United States and in California and in LA County are millennials, right? People that were born in the 80s and are now, you know, roughly between, you know, 18 and 40 years of age. That's a broad swath of our parents too. So some of the things, our research kind of mirrors a lot of these broader facts that millennials, they prefer to get information digitally. They prefer texting. I mean, we've all seen this. I mean, I'm guilty of it too. But that's how they prefer to get information. And so what we learned is asking, when we ask parents, where do they find parenting information? It wasn't necessarily from more, you know, traditional modes where, like with parenting, you would go, well, you maybe read the book, what to expect and you're expecting. Well, instead, it became, you know, maybe they would go to Baby Center, maybe they would go to another resource, but we found they Googled it, right? They would go, they'd had their problem. Well, how do I deal with this diaper issue? How do I deal with my child has a fever? Or things like that. So that's where they would go, and then they would essentially go to the resource that was top ranked, right? So that told us a lot of things too, that, well, what is that top rank? They didn't really care so much about that. If it looked credible, okay, good enough, right? So that was very important. And other channels too, like social media channels, like Facebook groups and even kind of moms groups that were online, that's where they would get information, right, about parenting. As well as texting was the most common activity. In particular, the nuance here is that Latinos and African Americans text even more, right? That's like the preferred platform. So it's just interesting to think about, well, that's how parents prefer to get information. That's how they're accessing information. So what do we do with it? And so that was something we did in 2015 in terms of the development of our Family Strengthening Public Education campaign. Is we wanted to learn those things. And then as we're in the process of developing our next phase of the campaign, we wanted to do a bit more research to see what has changed, what's new, what's different. And we learned that, again, you know, parents, they do rely on a wide variety of resources from government-sponsored programs like WIC to online resources. And what was fascinating, too, that we found that parents, you know, we talk about our own, you know, needing to, you know, braid or kind of weave in funds. They do something similar in terms of services and how they get information. They do their own type of braiding, which is really fascinating to tap into. We want to get more into that and learn more about that. But consistent with our findings, again, parents still Google it. In fact, even more. Phone usage is much higher, even more so. It was already high, but it's even higher now. And they're looking for, you know, key terms and phrases to address their problem at hand, right? And again, I mentioned resources. we found that mothers and single dads were much more adept at finding resources. So they were more tapped in because of necessity. That's what they'd have to do. And so what I wanted to share is, I know this is a lot of information, a lot broadly, but again, we looked at how are parents searching for information, and then how would they reach us? Because we wanted them to reach us, because this was for our public education campaign. We wanted them to come to First 5 LA in order to get information about parenting, about family strengthening, and even a calendar of events. And so what we had to do is change. So what we did was we built a separate new web platform that was what's called digital first, right? Our traditional, most websites are, what you would watch or you would see on a laptop or traditional computer. What we learned from our research is that's not what our parents use, right? When they're looking for information, they're not firing up their desktop computer, if they even have one. They're not going on a laptop. They're likely flipping open a tablet or a phone after they put the baby to sleep at odd hours, 10 o'clock at night, that kind of thing. So what we wanted to do in order to reach these parents, we had to create a platform that was what they were looking for. And we looked at, well, what do they want from us? And in particular, it was information, right? Parenting articles and resources, but also coupons for family-friendly events or free events, and a calendar that also showed those things. And so that's what we gave them, right? So we were very clear that the objectives that we had are very clear. And so we asked parents what they wanted, and we found a way to give it to them. And we did it in such a way that, again, knowing that parents Google it, that means that search is very important, right? You've probably all heard a phrase of SEO, or search engine optimization. What does that mean? What that means is, probably the best way to put this is a joke here, and that is, the best place to hide a dead body is the second page of Google search results, because no one goes there, okay? So search is important, and so what matters is, how do we get, this is helpful. You never know, you might need that information someday. I'm not sure. I hope not, but you never know, right? So it's important then to build a platform that would be found much quicker, right? When we first began this project back in 2015, I was maybe 2 months on the job. I searched for parenting tips just broadly, right? I didn't search for First 5 LA. I had to go maybe 27 pages deep before I found the first link, okay? So people weren't finding us. They would Google it, find a problem. They're not going to find us. Now, after doing these things with the page platform, when you search for things like parenting and parenting in LA, we're top ranked. We're on that first page. We're not the dead body, right? We are being found, and we're being used. And one thing I will point out with this platform, that this is, again, it's a separate architecture. I want to be clear about that. It's different than our main website, and it's intended to be seen first and look best on tablets and phones, which is what our parents are looking for. And we have other resources there. We make it easy to find. And that page itself, in terms of page rank and page views, it now surpasses our main website. So it's doing its job. It's reaching parents, and parents are reaching us. And so, I say that, I wanted to just go briefly over some of our lessons and how they can be applied, which I feel can have this is food for thought as we think about 211 and how are we reaching people. Because the intention is to give people access to resources, but are we reaching them with how they want to be reached, and are we making it easy for them? So those are just some things to consider as we move forward with this. So with that, I'll hand it back to Tara.
All right, well, thank you, Gabriel. So considering that important learning, we want to take a minute to historically also think about how we've invested in IR&R over the years. And largely that has been through our contract with 211 LA County. So since 2005, First 5 LA has provided funding to 211 LA County to offer integrated, coordinated, and comprehensive telephonic information, referral support, and assistance. And in addition, this last year, 211 LA County did launch a new and improved website to of course, expand their community services beyond the telephone referrals. So currently, our funding does support approximately 19% of their infrastructure budget, as is shown here, with the county supporting the remaining 81%. We provided a breakdown of our funding history here for you. which does total out to about 19.1 million, as I mentioned, since 2005. Our current funding is at 2.5 million. That does cover a 2-year period. And a quick reminder to the board that 211 LA County, our IR&R investment, is a legacy investment, and therefore it did go through the expiring initiatives review process, which resulted in a staff recommendation and was board approved to extend our contract with them based on potential alignment with our current strategic plan. Their current contract, though, does end this June of 2018. So First 5 LA, we wanted to also highlight just kind of 211 LA County's performance over this last year. Our staff does work closely with 211 LA County to track performance. They do provide monthly and semi-annual performance progress reports, and they also participate in a quarterly conference call to highlight successes and also resolve challenges. Performance metrics included here. They are asked to meet standard kind of call center targets, such as an average time to answer of 2 minutes or less per month, as well as participating in outreach events, and then of course finally maintaining a 15% or less abandonment rate. And as you see, based on their 16-17 year-end report, 211 LA County is meeting the time to answer and the outreach event targets, but has experienced challenges with reaching their targeted abandonment rate and keeping that throughout the year below at 15%. And I would say the kind of major contributor to that is staff turnover is probably the most common reason that they cite for that, not being able to meet that, as well as seasonal fluctuations in call volumes, such as back to school period is a very busy time, as well as the holiday months. So as far as numbers served during 16-17, almost 67,000 calls were handled by 211 LA County were from families with children 0 to 5 and pregnant women. That does represent about 15% of their total call volume. And those calls resulted in a total of over 85,000 children and over 13,000 pregnant women being served. And then within that 85,000, it resulted in the 69,000 noted here of children 0 to 5 who were screened for participation and access to ECE and also child development programs, resulting in the referrals we included. So additionally, First 5 LA does fund and support a community resource advisor position that is on-site in person at the Children's Court, which provides IR&R information and linkages to the number of families we had noted here, the 1,686 over the 16-17 period. And quickly, the kind of just for your information, the top 5 reasons service needs of 211 LA County callers are ECE, housing, emergency support, parenting, utility assistance, and then maternal/infant care. I didn't include that, but I can certainly send that in. Oh, sure. It is ECE, or child care referral, housing and emergency shelter, parenting, utility assistance, and then maternal infant care. So an important kind of shift in the context of countywide IR&R that it's occurred this last year that we wanted to bring back to the board is around the LA County CEO's office releasing an RFP, placing greater emphasis on non-telephonic general and specialized IR&R, and really pushing priorities around electronic and digital means that include websites, online chatting, texting, smartphone applications, push notifications, a lot of the stuff that Gabriel brought to light. The county did release this RFP last year in the fall of 2017, and they're working through the review and approval process right now. They do anticipate having an IR&R contractor on board with a new updated scope of work highlighting these priorities by July 1 of 2018, and given this timeline, it's important to note that the county does have delegated authority, though, to extend month to month through December of this year 211 LA County's current contract if contract review and approval process goes beyond that July 1 timeline. So as the county is kind of refining how and in what way they want to support IR&R moving forward, it seems to be the right time for us to do the same. So here we are, we're in 2018, year 3, if you can believe it already, of our strategic plan. We certainly see we are now in many of our kind of areas in our strategies are at an implementation stage. which offers us a moment to look across all 4 outcome areas, certainly beyond health, even though we're framing and I'm giving the presentation today, but looking at our work that's being implemented across our strategic plan, including our work in communities and early care and education, and of course in our families department, think about what are our needs related to IR&R going forward. So thinking about, to summarize, what are those important key takeaways from our presentation today? It certainly is beginning with parents are seeking information across a variety of sources that are relying largely on digital, as Gabriel mentioned, Googling it, Facebook, social media, and now I've learned, what was it? We are not the dead body. Okay.
Not.
That's my
Very much
takeaway
alive.
from you. At the same time, our county partner has taken a moment to explore and redefine how they will support IR&R, placing emphasis on technology and diverse platforms. So we think it is important to track the county's process and outcome to help inform and guide our future thinking. So as we move into implementation of our strategic plan, it is time to take a moment to think about the connection, the role, and the contribution of IR&R across our entire strategic plan. So considering these factors, staff is recommending that the board waive governance guideline number 7, which is the expiration of grants and contracts. And that's required because the contract, as I mentioned at the beginning, is coming to an end in June of this year. And we're asking for an extension of 211 LA County's contract for an additional 6 months to align with the county's RFP timeline and process. And then that will also allow staff the time to complete an organization-wide inquiry process to really look at this potential alignment of IR&R across all 4 outcome areas, and ultimately come back to the board to recommend a future IR&R investment. And then, of course, the funds to support this extension will come from our general fund and would be included in our 18-19 budget under legacy investments. So next steps, we would be coming back to the board at our March meeting for action on this item. And then, as mentioned, once we have completed this organization-wide inquiry process, be coming back to the board in the fall of this year with a recommendation on our kind of future IR&R investment. And that's it. We can then open it up for comments and questions.
Commissioner
Gabriel.
Woods has a question.
Hi, Todd. Can you help me understand how the extension will, I understand how it would help 211, but the alignment. If 211's contract end with First 5, June 30th, 2018, you're requesting to have it extended another 6 months. When is the RFP due, and how much time does that really give 211 to align with the IRR or the CEO's RFP? And then what happens if they are not recipients of that RFP?
So the county's IR&R RFP process has closed. So they are in the review and approval process right now. So we are working closely with the county and waiting to hear what the outcome of that review process is and who the final contractor that is selected. So that we still are hearing from the county that they're moving towards this July 1 contract in place date, but they do have that authority through December of 2018 to extend if they aren't able to meet that timeline. So we wanted to align our timeline, the extension, with the counties to wait and hear what the county decides to then inform this organization, both 2 parts, to kind of inform our future investment, hear from our county partners what their decision is, and then have the time to go through this org-wide process looking at what is the value of IR&R based on new data we know about how parents are accessing, utilizing information, what's the role it plays across all 4 of our strategic plan outcome areas, and then make a decision about, or a recommendation to the board about a future IR&R investment.
Just one more follow-up. If 211 does not happen to receive the funds, do they have another sustainability plan, or is First 5 LA their only other option beyond the RFP that's pending right now?
Are you referring to receiving the county funds or our funding, or both? I guess.
Beyond First 5 LA is the county funding their only other sustainability option or alternate revenue if you want?
Their core infrastructure is funded by the county and First 5 LA. So that was the breakdown earlier. It essentially breaks down to, our funding is essentially used to support staffing, and the county is the other funder of that core infrastructure. So the county is obviously the bulk of it at 81,000, and then our contribution has been through the years anywhere from 15 to 20% of their budget. So,
Commissioner Abdo?
I feel like a deja vu moment because one of my first meetings at First 5 was about 211 and communication and how people were not using regular phones and calling up asking for appointments. So I'm just going to extend that and say I'm really glad that all of this work has taken place. It's taken a while, unfortunately, but now there are new platforms happening. And I'm hoping that there's a flexibility to the upper end of this, I guess, that has to do with Snapchat and Instagram. And then when I just asked the 29-year-old who lives in my house how he knew something that was, like, how would he know this? I watch a lot of videos, he said. So it's YouTube. And I don't know whether that's really the direction that the millennials and then the next generations are taking, but I don't want us to be getting into a place where now we've got another out-of-date way of communicating, and I'm hoping we have flexibility so that we don't get into that again.
I think we're certainly leaning on, I think it was exciting to see the county ready to revisit and look at this differently and put out the RFP with heavy emphasis on the digital platforms. I think there's an awareness among staff. We don't want to be building a gas engine in a solar battery world. So I think that's why we're trying to take the moment to pause, think about our work across all areas of the strategic plan. What's the important role of IR&R around that? How can we best support it, knowing we live in different times with the technology advances we do. And I think that's why we wanted to lean on all of the research coming out of the communications department and the learning that we heard from the focus groups to really understand that better.
I want to add one caveat to that too, is that I know there's many platforms out there, like social media platforms, Snapchat, etc. But we have to be mindful, and I say this for us, but also this would go for any other agency like or program like 211. You don't want to build on rented land because in many cases, many of you probably heard of Vine or Periscope. They're gone, right? There are people who built their entire revenue stream, right, as sending like Vine videos, things like that. Now it's gone. So you have to be, this is something again to consider, looking at platforms. Well, is it dependent upon other platforms or is it something that we own? And the other point of this too, I bring this up because our challenge at First 5 is, well, we want to build relationships with our audience, right? And so that's why it's important to have our own platform, as well as, we do use social media channels to publicize that platform to bring people to us. Because we know that down the road, Facebook's going to change your algorithm or their ad rates or what have you, or be gone. We want to own that audience by either an email list or things like that, so that we can still communicate with them directly. So that's not what 211 is doing. They're not looking to build a relationship, but it's just something to kind of keep in mind too, that platforms, you're absolutely right, that they change and they could change again, right, and keep changing.
Probably not spending a lot of time on MySpace.
Start with the budget. You state here that the extension will be funded through the legacy funds. My question is this unexpended legacy funds in 2018-19?
actually had a conversation with Raul before this, so he gave me the exact GASB. I know everybody loves GASB here in language. It will come from the assigned funds to support the strategic plan. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I just want to know that we've already put it in the budget. That's what I'm saying.
It will be added. So
So-
they're in the current 17-18 budget. Obviously, this is going into 18-19, so it will need to be added to the 18-19 budget.
For the next budget.
Yes.
So we will make an allowance for that. So we have
Yep.
funds to support that, is the question.
That is my understanding from the
Okay.
assigned funds.
That answered that one. The other thing is, the reason we're recommending this moving forward is that it aligns with our current strategic plan, and then I'm hearing we want to revisit that. And what is it that they are aligning with under this extension that we already have?
So we included the terminology potential alignment, which is also the description we've used in the past to extend 211 and get the board approval and support of that. And as legacy investments come to an end, we review them against a select set of criteria, and then make a recommendation if there is potential alignment with the strategic plan for the board to approve and continue that. So we have previously recommended extension of 211 based on potential alignment connected to their work as a call center, with potentially aligning with our Help Me Grow investment, because a part of that work has a centralized access point, which includes typically a call center from other Help Me Grows. And so that has been our kind of justification and recommendation to continue them previously. So we're at a point now where that work will be handled by the Department of Public Health in our partnership with LA County Department of Public Health. They will be further defining and designing the centralized access point for Help Me Grow. 211 could still be a potential candidate or play a role related to that, but that is now in the hands of Department of Public Health to decide. And so we still see, though, a potential of IR&R generally. Help Me Grow is more of a very specialized IR&R, but we see a potential role for IR&R across all areas of our strategic plan. We've previously focused on health. Now we want to open it up across all four and think about what is the contribution and role of IR&R across the other areas, take the time to examine that, and then come back to the board to say, in the future, this is how we think it can best serve our work.
Well, I'm hoping that, I'm hearing Help Me Grow because I was going to ask you that question, so that's very good. But how does it connect to our other major investment of Welcome Baby and Select Home Visitation?
Yep, I
You
think
know,
that's,
we put a lot of effort into this, and so they need to connect to that too. And then the other thing is, you want time to do it, so I'm looking at 11 months, if you add the 6 months, to come up with a plan. So we're not going to have a plan by June of what that would be, the strategic connection to the 4 strategies?
Well,
Are
I
we going to
think-
see that as a board?
I
as a
think we
commission?
also want to wait to hear where the county goes and what comes out of the county decision. And so we are working closely with them to hear the latest from them, what the decision they make regarding our IR&R. So we're trying to figure out what's an appropriate amount of time, thinking that 6 months would give us enough to hear from the county, to do this review process across our strategic plan, and then make the decision and then come back to the board to make a recommendation.
I hope we will use this time to come up with this potential strategy you keep talking about, rather than waiting for what the county's going to do by June, so that we can at least be positioned to move left or right of whatever the county's going to do. You know, so you're asking us to extend this. I'm not opposed to that, but I'd like to see some kind of our strategy by June of what we think how that connects to our 4 strategic plan goals. And that way we'll know that we'll be better positioned moving forward, because this left me with a lot of questions, as you see. And I'm looking at time and I'm looking at money. So I really want a real outcome goal setup. What are the target goals for this, and how does that connect to our strategy, and how does it connect to our major investments?
I think a piece of that also is to think through transition. That we have to recognize that if 211 is not selected by the county, or if we want to move to a different contract, we're trying to also allow for some transition time in that within that extension.
That can be a part of the plan.
Yes,
An
absolutely.
option
I
B.
think
Absolutely.
that's absolutely right. So there are a lot of different moving pieces here, some of which are within our control, some of which are going to be informed by decisions made by the county. That timeline has moved on a number of occasions over the course of the past year, but I think your point is very well taken and message delivered. Let's us revisit our timeline for the development of the plan, recognizing we still need to await learning from what is happening with the counties and what type of transition may be required.
And if we have a plan B, if that doesn't happen.
Other questions or comments? Well, thank you for that presentation. I know you're shooting at a moving target, so, or maybe it's not moving, I don't know. But thank you for that, and we'll go ahead and go on to item 6, Communities Outcome Review Results from Community Partnerships Survey. Antoinette, Jonathan, and Joaquin will be presenting.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is a very exciting time in the Programs Division. Opportunities to integrate our work across the outcome areas are emerging, and staff is open and attentive to uncover and explore these connection points in order to strengthen the impact of First 5 LA's investments. The presentation today is grounded in, is about joint efforts across the agency, grounded in First 5 LA values, to improve outcomes for kids by strengthening families, communities, and the systems of services and supports upon which families rely. What you will hear today is a specific example of how our work is unfolding and connecting across the health systems and communities outcome areas. During the last Program and Planning Committee meeting, our colleagues from the Health Systems Department shared the guiding principles and implementation domains recommended in the Trauma and Resiliency Informed Systems Change Report. As the board is aware, the report, which was disseminated last fall, was generated by a cross-system countywide work group funded in partnership with First 5 LA and 4 other funders. Also in the fall, the Communities Department and Integration and Learning Division were beginning to analyze data from a survey that we distributed to members of the Best Start partnerships in order to understand their experiences with the support they have been receiving. As survey data was being analyzed, staff was reading the report, noting intersections between community capacity building, trauma, and resiliency. Collaboration between the health systems and communities departments has since become much stronger as we explore opportunities to integrate our work more concretely. As this quote points out, reflecting on experience is the genesis of learning. Today's presentation highlights staff reflections on community member experiences, which are shaping our collective learning and informing how we transition to a new structure for the Best Start partnerships. This presentation, as well as the September 2017 presentation on the Building Stronger Families grants, focuses on what we are learning from our investments in the partnerships since the beginning of the current strategic plan. And we're also in the process of developing a Best Start learning agenda that will frame our learning over the next 2 years of the strategic plan, with the consistent with the shift to the new structure for supporting the Best Start partnerships. I am absolutely honored today to sit with my colleagues. Jonathan Nomachi is a program officer in the Communities Department, as well as Joaquin Calderon, who is a senior program officer in the Communities Department. One key takeaway from what they will share is that the stories behind the data that we collect can reveal powerful and sometimes unanticipated connection points and opportunities for integration across First 5 LA's outcome areas. So with that, I want to turn it over to Jonathan.
Thank you, Antoinette. Good afternoon, everyone. Just a quick transparency. I missed Kim's presentation because I went outside to do a virtual cartwheel because you were all talking about the importance of data and storytelling. And so really, as we move into what the objectives of, there we go. There is a bullet there about how data can tell stories. So I won't go into my 15-minute spiel about that. But for the rest of the presentation, what we're going to really talk about is the story that came from the Community Partnership Survey results. And then we're going to talk about how that story and that discussion led to another story. And Joaquin Calderon is going to take the lead and really talking about how that is connected to some of the great work that we're doing around trauma-informed systems change work. We're going to wrap up with talking a little bit about kind of the future stories and connectivity points to hear more great stories, hopefully more from community members themselves. And then we'll wrap up with some discussion and great dialogue that I know we'll be having. So without further ado, we'll go right into the results. And so between July and September of last year, we developed a 2-page survey, and we disseminated that out to the 14 partnerships. And we collected over 718 surveys. I want to take a moment to applaud the Communities Department folks that are here, because 718 may seem like not a lot, but it is, I think, you know, and for those that are geeky like myself in the survey design world, it's an accomplishment. 57% of those were in Spanish as well, and we actually did have a few that came in through Khmer translation. And so just to give you a lay of the land. And the purpose of the survey, again, was to really share and find out community feedback around experiences, their satisfaction, as well as the support that they feel they're receiving. And so we'll jump right into that. So experiences, as you can kind of look at the numbers, I also actually, let me take one quick second to, I think some of you all may have seen this, hopefully in the attachments. We printed it out because it's overly large. And so we wanted to make sure you also had a chance to experience what the community members will be experiencing, because we will be sharing this information via this format, placemat style, if you will. So as it relates to experiences, you'll see that there's a high percentage that really felt networking really came through. There was also this need of community unity that came into play. And so really when you think of the story here, it's really about partnerships being this place for strengthening of families, networking, and healing. As we move into the satisfaction area, this one is interesting, and what I'll highlight here, which is not directly on the slides, is the fact that there is variability across the partnerships. And so the data that you see here is really this culmination of all the partnerships together, but we did want to bring up the fact that there is some, you know, differences based on partnerships, and particularly as it relates to satisfaction, one of our big areas of support is around things like childcare, transportation, and so we are always striving to, you know, max out at 100%, if you will, with satisfaction. We know that there are lessons learned, and so really this really is highlighting the fact that satisfaction, we're getting there, and we're always going to strive to do better. Support. And this is one that I think really then connects nicely to the following story, which is looking at the percentages around safety inclusive. There was really a high percentage of folks who felt that the partnerships themselves were safe and inclusive spaces. Also that there was this great creation of relationships between community members and service providers. And so there's real need that there was something going on around support at that local level. The story here, from my point of view, is that the partnerships themselves are now community healing spaces. And this is, I think, a great segue to Joaquin, who's going to talk about another story related to that.
Thank you, Jonathan, and good afternoon. This next story about community partnerships and the work that they're doing that relates to strengthening community resilience came after hearing this presentation from Jonathan that he did at a brown bag session for our department and staff. As well as at the same time, we were reading this report around trauma and resiliency, a systems change approach. And what stood out as I was hearing the feedback and reading this report was this third definition called out in the report around community, which calls out that for a discussion around trauma and resiliency, there needs to be another definition around community that calls out what you see here on the screen, that communities defined mainly as groups of people who provide tangible support to each other and can act together. The Best Start Community Partnerships, as Jonathan mentioned, are spaces, are healing spaces that strengthen the resilience of the individual as well as the collective. And this comes as a result of years of partnership developing and refining their structure to be more inclusive, to be diverse, and safe spaces. In the early years of developing partnerships, the capacity building really focused on healing divisions that really resulted from where I was at in South LA, changing demographics, issues that around ethnic tensions that had been heightened, language barriers. So we couldn't walk into the room and talk about developing a common agenda if we weren't dealing with issues that were keeping people apart. And so one of the first things that I remember partnerships doing around healing, at least one of the partnerships that I was involved in, and they did a lot of activities, but they'd created this strategy around finding shared experiences. And they asked everyone in the room to draw a picture of how they ended up to where they are today, where they live today. And whether it was going back to grandparents or if it was their own personal journey, but everyone had a story of migration, whether it was from one city to the next, one state, country. And it was this shared experience and finding that that allowed the group to then talk about, well, what are our shared values? And everyone in the room had migration stories that lent themselves to wanting to improve the conditions for themselves or for their families, for their children. And from these shared experiences, we were able to start talking about how we wanted this space to be more inclusive, to be a healing space. And that really led to conversations around structure and around bylaws and how they wanted to make decisions and interact with each other. And it really laid the foundation for the strong structures that partnerships have today. And so community partnerships are enhancing and strengthening the community as the relationships and bridges they built extend out of the partnership meeting space and into the larger community. And we're actually joined today by Patricia, who's here from the Compton Partnership, leadership group member, traveled here from a leadership group, or from a partnership meeting where she actually led a conversation around Black History Month. But she shared a story with me recently that really stood out, where she talked about her career in accounting and how after leaving that career, she found Best Start and really just had more time to do more work in the community. And after she was elected to the leadership group, she began to work closely with a lot of the teen parents that have come to commission meetings in the past and learn their story. And the story that Patricia shared with me, it doesn't actually occur in a partnership space. It's actually occurred out at a coat factory, at the Burlington Coat Factory, where Patricia was shopping, and she saw one of these leadership group members, a teen mother who works full time, goes to school as well, and Patricia knew her story from the partnership and was able to relate from her own experience. And she said, you know what, I need to go and just check in on her and ask how she's doing, and made the connection out in the larger community for not only this young parent, but for others to see as well. And so Patricia shared with me that every time she goes back, she checks in on this young mother. And this is just one of many stories where people are running into each other, whether it's at the park or at the church or at the neighborhood council meetings, at the community gardens, as you can see some of the pictures, where these relationships are going out into the community. And these are the types of relationships, especially as we saw with the early work of partnership building, that are needed to act together towards moving a much larger community agenda. That trust, that relationship is already there. So as we start to position our agency around policy and systems change, the work taking place in the Best Start communities lends itself to many possibilities to strengthen local, county, and statewide strategies directed at becoming more trauma-informed. And one possibility that stands out in the report comes out of Tarpon Springs, Florida, where the city signed an MOU developed by community members in collaboration with the city to increase awareness of issues facing members of our community who have been traumatized to promote healing. Who best to be at the forefront, right, of these efforts than the Patricias and these young parents who are taking on leadership positions in our partnership, who have already figured out how to work together collectively, harmoniously, to move a common agenda. And these are in areas or in communities that need the most unity, that need the most bridge building. to really create that resilience and that strength that's needed. So that was the story I wanted to share. And I'll turn it back over to Jonathan.
Thank you, Joaquin, and thank you, Patricia. I think we can all agree that with all the data that you saw and shared in the memo, I think really the great piece of data that just came out was this great story. And so I think hopefully through the theme of today about the importance of combining both data with storytelling is going to be so valuable moving forward. And as we think about future stories, we're actually going to be releasing the survey results in this placemat at tomorrow's Leadership Summit that we'll be hosting. We're also going to be looking at future opportunities to engage community members to get their feedback. If the leadership bodies request, we'll be going out there and working with them on that information. We're also going to keep figuring out ways to improve our ability to get more feedback and more impactful feedback from the partnership members themselves. And then finally, as we are moving towards this new structure, how can we continue to model this reflective learning integration concept, particularly because it is going to become a very exciting time in the very near future for us. So with that, we'd like to say thank you. And before we wrap up, just maybe some prompts for some Q&A. Can you guess though which of us is which? That is the question. That's right. That is correct.
I told my mom that it looked like I was going to be tall in that picture.
Yep.
Comments, questions from commissioners?
I'll let somebody else go first. Okay.
I'll go first if I could just thank this young lady over here who participated as a leader in the community. More of you are needed. Keep doing what you're doing.
Well, I was part of the Compton-East Compton partnership and part of the leadership group, and I want to thank my colleague for stepping up to be a leader. But I also want to stretch the hand out to my colleague behind me who were also a part of the leadership, Saul Figueroa. Let's give him a hand. He's working with the young parents and young teenagers that are having children in Compton, and the community stepped up to address this issue. So I want to thank him for all the good work. He's developing leaders. He actually has active young people that are now part of the leadership group and doing some great creative things. The other thing is that I noticed that the percentage is down on advocacy for policy and leadership. I hope that encourage you guys to work on that and see how we can improve that for the community. I thank you for having them to develop safe space. I'm glad you pointed out the issue of divide that used to be there in some of these communities. In Compton, we came together real strong behind these children and these families, and I think, yes, that is a very good thing they're doing. I would like to ask that we understand more about how the new structure that we're working on is working for the communities. I was honored to be asked to come to the groups in South Central LA and start that dialogue to encourage them to work together across the different partnerships. And I'd really be interested in how that's coming, and continue to support you and encourage you to continue to do this good work. Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you, Commissioner Taylor. Other comments, questions? I'd like to commend your efforts. I realize that Best Start's come a long way. You're in a new phase, and I think it's important not only to tell the stories of individuals, but also your own story, because this is relatively new work in social services, I think, place-based, and we need to understand how we can take this out and inform other people about what it is that we did that appeared to help and lessons learned, best practices, all, you know, all the jargon you want to say about it. But I think it's very important, and so I commend you for that. So thank you. We do have a request to speak from Saul Figueroa. So I invite you to speak, Saul.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, First Five Commissioners, First Five LA staff, and community members. My name is Saul Figueroa, and I am the Program Manager for Nido Family Center and Building Stronger Families. Fortunate, take one, privilege. I've been with the Nido Family Center in Compton, and working in the South LA community for the past 20 years. I'm a Compton resident, homeowner, and father. I have a soon-to-be 3-year-old who will be starting preschool on Monday. And I can honestly say that being a member, and it's, as someone said, you know what, it doesn't matter what economic status you hold, how much money you make, but Best Start has helped me to get my child in a preschool at a very early age. And if it wasn't for Best Start, where we had the child care, because I got a lot of feedback from my child care provider, and she told me, your child is ready for school. I've seen her and observed her when you brought her here to the meeting, and she's ready. And she goes, I was really honored the first day I seen her that she was able to stay by herself without mom and dad being there, and told me this baby is ready to go learn. More than, she can learn more than what we can teach her here on a periodic basis when you come and leave her for childcare, and she's ready. You know, in my household, I have a 2.5-year-old, but I'm a caretaker of an 80-year-old, my mom. And one of the things that we've, as Building Stronger Families, we've noticed by surveying the partnership as well as the participants in our Life Skills Coach program, we noticed that there was a lot of intergenerational work being done, from the seniors to the babies to the teen parents, and we needed to bridge it. And we were very fortunate as the Nido Family Centers to be able to write a grant to the Eisner Foundation to increase our intergenerational work. And I wanted to announce that we received a $220,000 grant to expand the work of the intergenerational work that we've seen being done in the partnerships in the communities and Building Stronger Families for Compton and for Colima. So I wanted to let you guys know that, you know, when we're talking about what we're supposed to be doing and how it's supposed to be working, this is what I envision too, that, you know, being able to leverage the resources in our community by the work that we're doing. And there's a lot of other funding streams that our partnership and our communities can leverage once we start really developing this model of self-sufficiency and empowerment. So I wanted to let all the commissioners and everyone here know that, you know what, it's working. And I want to tell you, we're just so proud to get that grant.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
I just, very briefly, it's a privilege to be here. This is my first meeting. I had often inquired about it. And, Hakeem, he invited me. I want to say the young lady who Dulce, she also worked with Saul, and she's very diligent, and I would work with, they have teen parents conference over at Cal State Long Beach, Cal State Dominguez. And I just watched her. I watched how different events, she's very diligent. And I'm a researcher. I don't like to but I like to get a good price. And long story, I'm being real. I did accounting for a number of years, and I saw the cost. So, long story short, I went into Burlington, and I was coming up to the counter, and lo and behold, Dulce was there. We both, it was really cool. I thought it was really nice. And periodically, I would just ask her, how's it going? But I know she's in school. She has like 3 years old, and she's busy, but she's being very productive. And I was there when it first started, when we first decided that we would work with teen parent population. And it's just been a blessing, a privilege to be able to be a part, just whatever small part.
Stimulating series of conversations, and gives us a lot to think about as we're stuck in traffic driving home. Thank you.
Does that mean we're adjourned?
Yes.
Yes.
And it was just about some of the things we talked about in terms of partnership with Dr. Eduardo. And we were just looking at how we can get teachers